Hey everybody, this is Jim the Tabletop Engineer, and welcome to a new Let's Paint a Mini video. Tonight I am going to be painting something different. This is Rasputin. Yes, that Rasputin. He is one of 10 miniatures from a game called Cthulhu, Death May Die. This is a game I asked for from my wife a while back, and I've really been wanting to play it. But the miniatures just, they look so boring. They're all painted the same color, and I feel like I want to paint them. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to point the camera down at the desktop here and get to painting in just a second. But let me tell you what I want to talk about tonight. Let me get a paper towel. So what and granted, keep in mind, this is not scripted. This is just sort of off the cuff. It's mostly based on just videos I've watched and just things I ponder on when I'm stuck in traffic here in Atlanta, or when I'm just, sort of half asleep. I start pondering on these things. So what do I want to talk to you about? I want to talk to you about this. Our hobby, and I'm mainly speaking right now about RPGs, specifically Dungeons and Dragons, but I think this applies to a lot of our hobby, whether it's wargaming or board games or whatever. And my concern is this, and I'm speaking from a Dungeons and Dragons point of view. Our hobby, the D&D hobby right now, seems to be just this firestorm of sensationalism. I mean, do you agree or disagree? What I mean is, I'm going to move this down. What I mean is that it's a game. Our hobby is just generating. Now, granted, any subject on the internet is going to have trolls and it's going to have flame wars and things like that. But what's driving me crazy is that it just seems of late that the Dungeons and Dragons is just getting a little crazy. Now, granted, it is because Wizards has announced, recently the D&D 1, which is the new, it's going to be the new version of Dungeons and Dragons, and it's supposed to be replacing 5, and I think that has irritated some people who like 5 and are worried that this digital solution that Wizards is promoting is gonna take away from the game somehow. And I'm not saying it won't. I'm saying we don't have enough information yet. The game's not even out. I mean, it's not due out for another 2 years, 2024. So, but what I'm noticing lately is this. Our hobby, we create, I think we create the news. It seems like we create the problems. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing. There are some great YouTube channels that I subscribe to and I watch, and they bring up valid points. But they also sometimes stir the pot. You know what I'm saying? And that's not a bad thing. I don't think it's ever a bad thing to talk about our hobby and its place in our lives and its place in the world. But we are talking about, and I'm on the D&D subject here, we're talking about a game that is fictional, that has wizards and clerics and thieves breaking the law, and they all gather in taverns to talk about their exploits, and they go and they steal magic items from, rich people, and they go into dungeons and they fight monsters, and it's fictional. It's this crazy game that we all love and we love to play, and yet for some reason, lately, D&D seems to be causing trouble amongst its fans. And I think we're all fans, those of us who've played Dungeons & Dragons, I think we all love the game, or a version of the game. Now, I will admit that I am a little bit nervous about where Wizards is taking D&D, but not really. And I'll be honest, I'm not worried because I don't play that version. My catchphrase, I've used it on my blog, and I've said it to numerous people at conventions and online, is I don't care. Play your game of D&D. Play the one you want. I don't care what version you play, but I'm going to play the version that makes me happy, and that's all there is to it. Wizards can change up they can change things up. They can monetize everything. They can, they can do microtransactions, which is the new thing that seems to be hinting at with D&D 1 is that, since it's going digital, you'll have this in-game avatar, like the digital version of a miniature, right? But you'll have to pay microtransactions for it to customize it, to make it look like the character you want. And hey, more power to Wizards if they can pull it off. I mean, for me, that has no appeal, zero appeal. I'm in the old school. I started with original, well, not original. I started with the Holmes version of D&D. So yeah, I'm definitely old school, and I'm not going to change. I'm not going to change the game that I like to play. I have found it. I don't want to lose it again. I got into 5e. I got really into 5e and played it quite a bit, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the players. I made a lot of friends playing D&D. But really what it comes down to is it wasn't the game for me. And I've moved on to I've moved on to a new game of an old game. It's called Old School Essentials, which is basically basic D&D or advanced D&D, depending on how you run it. And so I'm finding it sort of interesting that so much is being made about D&D 1 and the negatives about it. It doesn't appeal to me. I do worry that Wizards may have shot itself in the foot with some of what it's planning here. But again, I don't know their business. They probably have their finger on the pulse of their audience. They probably have a fairly accurate number for like the number of players that play 5e or that have shown interest in 6, or I call it 6, D&D 1. I just don't know. All I know is I'm not going backwards. It would take a lot right now for Wizards to convince me to come back to their version of Dungeons and Dragons. I'm just not interested. But I'm also not going to be negative or tell people, oh, you don't want to play D&D 1 or whatever. Who's that? That's not for me to say. My kids might prefer D&D 1 over the version I play. I just don't know. Now, I will say that the younger kids that I've run games for, they tend to not know any difference between OSR and 5e or any version. They like to swing weapons and roll dice, and it's fun. And that's really the name of the game, if you want to be honest about it. I mean, it's all about just enjoying the time with your friends, and if that's going to be online, then hey, it'll be online. But for me, the online version just doesn't appeal, and I think that's where Wizards is really pushing D&D 1. It definitely seems to be that you're going to want to have this subscription to the rules and the subscription to like the play area, whatever that may be, if it's something like Roll20 or whatever that service is. I just don't know. I have a feeling they're going to roll out some custom software that you have to download to your computer or your tablet, or I don't know how that's going to work. And it would be this software that has to you'll pay a subscription for it, right? You'll pay a monthly fee or a yearly fee or what have you. And that's fine. I mean, if they can pull that off, again, like I said, more power to them if they can pull that off. I just don't know. I'm not a gambling man, but if somebody were to ask me what my odds were that D&D 1 will be some mega hit, I would say 50-50. I really don't know. I think that the introduction of D&D 1 over the last, I don't know when they announced it, but however long since they announced it, I think it's made a lot of gamers, people who really, really want to play on a regular basis, it's making them look at their game style. It's making them look at the group of players that they currently play with. And I think they're asking the questions of whether or not they're going to want to play this version of D&D. And if they don't, they're also looking at, well, what are my options? Now, this is a true story. I should post a picture on it. I will try to remember to include a picture with this video. I was at one of my local gaming stores today, and I don't say favorite local gaming store because here in Atlanta, I've got like 4 gaming stores that I have access to, and they're all favorites. But I was in a gaming store today, and they had the nicest display in there. When you walk in, they have different little pedestals that they put new games on to show off, and they had one entire side of a pedestal dedicated to just old school essentials. They got in the advanced books, the basic books, the reference books, the adventure book module, what we would call modules, but they're in book form. They had all of it out, and it just made me smile because it was so cool to see everything like, right there in front of you. And if somebody were looking for OSE, hit me up if you need, and I'll give you the information. They had everything you could imagine or want. It was really, really impressive. But it just makes me realize that I think right now we are in a phase where people are going to be looking. They're going to be going, okay, if they want to play D&D 1, they're in. They're going to do it. And they're just waiting to see how Wizards handles this, right? But those of us who aren't going to be playing it, we've moved on. I give very little thought to D&D 1 until I watch a video like I did today. I watched one of Professor Dungeon Master's videos on it, and it made me ponder for a minute. But all it did was remind me that why am I watching this? Other than I watch it because I like Professor Dungeon Master. It just doesn't appeal to me, and it's not going to sway me to play it. As a matter of fact, if anything, it's made me realize that if I want to keep playing the game I want to play, I'm going to have to find players for it. One of my local gaming stores runs games on Wednesday night, and I'm really getting antsy to run old school essentials. It's finally sort of peaked with me, and I think I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to go ahead and just ask them for a table, and I'm going to sit down, and if anyone walks in and they want to play, they can. Now, if they come in and say, I want to play D&D, I'm not going to lie to them. I'll say, well, this is an open source, this is an open source version of an older version of Dungeons and Dragons. If they want more details, I'll give them as much as they want. But if they're just wanting to sit down and play an adventure and roll some dice and have some fun, I'll tell them, have a seat and take a chance. You never know what you're gonna find here. But it is interesting that we are reaching a point now where we're starting to take sides. That's where my point of this conversation is going. It's like we've reached a point where we're starting to infight, right? I mean, it's us versus them. Oh, I'm old school. I'm an old school guy. I'm gonna be doing this. I'm all about D&D 1. I'm a patriot. I don't know. That's the wrong word, but it's like, okay, we don't need to be divided on this. If anything, we should be concerned as a group because how this develops could affect other RPGs down the line, right? I mean, I like Call of Cthulhu. I rarely get to play it, but is Chaosium going to are they going to be watching this and asking themselves, how can we follow and make money like Wizards is doing? How far are they willing to go for profits and stuff? I mean, look, they're a business. If they don't make profit, if they don't make money, they go out of business. They can't pay their employees. So I do worry. I think a lot of companies will be watching how Wizards rolls this out because it could be another gaming company down the road that's doing something along these lines, right? If you're not a D&D player but you have some other RPG, you're going to want to pay attention because this digital landscape, this digital platform for Dungeons and Dragons, this could be the future for other RPGs. And speaking for me, I don't like to play games in a digital world. I did it during COVID because I had to. It was the only only way I could. But did I enjoy it? Not really. I mean, there were moments. There were moments that were fun. But yeah, I got to say that I really prefer the in-person, sitting at a table, playing D&D. And if that's the version I want to play, well, guess what? It's not looking like D&D 1 is going to be the game for me. Even if I want to play D&D 1, I think the cards are stacked against me because it looks like I would have to buy a subscription, and I would also have to hope that the books, the rule books, I prefer a rule book in hand. I don't want to be looking at my iPad, flipping. I will tell you this, looking at rules in a digital PDF on an iPad or something similar, a tablet, is not as easy as flipping a book. You can turn a book 10, 20, 30 pages at a time, but if you know something's in the very back, you can usually sort of guesstimate and flip and be near it, especially if you access it a lot. But with an iPad, you can't do that. It's one page at a time. Now, there are ways to tap, and then you'll get this like bar at the bottom where you can like jump way ahead. But I find that those kind of methods for moving around a PDF are not intuitive. It's hard to judge where in the book I need to jump from these little thumbnails. With a book, I'm more about the thickness of the book. I'm like, okay, it's more towards the 3/4 part, so I know where to jump. Now, granted, that's a really minor complaint, but it really comes down to a lot of us know whether or not we're going to want to play a digital version or not. And if the only way I can play a digital game is with online rules that are kept up to date constantly, and I have to keep I don't know what the word is, it's an update or a patch or whatever. If I have to keep doing that, that's not going to fly with me. And so you've probably already determined I've sort of made my bed. I know that I prefer this old school method, and you're not going to change my mind. Wizards is going to have a very difficult time changing my mind. And if they're going to have a difficult time changing my mind, they're going to have a difficult time changing a lot of GMs' minds. And I'm a GM. One of the things that Wizards is hoping to do with this change is they want to make money off the players, right? And that makes sense. It makes total sense because traditionally the GM is the one buying the adventure books, the DM guide, which is usually the most expensive of the books, the monster manual. Now, players will often buy these books, but they won't bring them necessarily to the game. Now, if I see a player with a Dungeon Master guide at my table, I tell them put it away. I don't need another DM at the table looking at the rules and things like that. But again, it comes down to I think Wizards is doing what they feel is best, which is monetizing the entire game, finding ways to not only charge the GM, but to make money off the players. And, a player at my table, all they've got to spend is get some dice, and I'll provide dice if they don't have them, and I'll provide a miniature if they show up and they're new and they don't have a miniature to play. But about the only thing I ask a regular attending player to bring is their character sheet, some dice, a pen, a pencil, and and that's about it. And their miniature if we're playing with miniatures. So it's interesting to me. It's going to be an interesting reveal to see how if you talk about videos now that are addressing all these issues, this game hasn't even been released yet. So just think about what it's going to be when D&D 1 is released. All these YouTube channels, and this one too, I talk about it. I'll talk about my thoughts on it. But there's going to be so many videos with people's opinions on D&D 1 and why this is good or why this is bad and why this rule should be stricken and why wasn't this rule included we are going to be flooded with videos from people asking, questions, just like when 5e came out. There was a flood of videos for 5e, but 5e is kind of slowed down. There's still channels that are devoted to it, but you haven't seen anything yet. And when 5e came out, I mean, you did have parties. You had the 3-5, you had the advanced D&D crowd and the old school crowd. But when 5e came out, people were pretty impressed with it, and they wanted to play it. And so the player base jumped, and it was impressive. But now Wizards is kind of forcing our hand. They're making us choose. You can play the old school way, which is at a table with paper and dice and miniatures, or you can play the new way, and everybody's going to be paying for it who wants to play. It's pay to play. If you want to sit at a digital table, they're going to find a way to make $1 off of you. It's the software you have to install, or maybe you're going to have to customize your digital mini, kind of like the Hero Forge thing. They're going to make their money off the players. So for players who really don't want to spend that kind of money, they're gonna have to choose one path. And Professor Dungeon Master had it, or it was him or somebody else that said there are these two groups. There's the folk D&D and the new D&D, and I couldn't have said it better. Folk D&D are going to be those of us who want to keep playing D&D, and we want to play it the way we want to play it, and we don't want to be nickeled and dimed to play the game. Now, the new players, they may not see it that way. They may not see it as nickel and dime. What they may see it as is, hey man, $10, I got this mini exactly the way. We say a mini, okay? They're going to be talking about a digital one. Now, I guarantee you that if Wizards doesn't do it, they're going to partner with Hero Forge or some company so that players, once they pay their money and design their character, their digital miniature the way they like, Wizards will have some way to turn that into an actual physical mini, right? You'll either download the STL, which I doubt. I'll go ahead and say I doubt Wizards is going to make the STL available. What they'll do is they'll offer to act as a middleman to some company that will print it out either in color, which will cost you more, or they'll print it out primed or unpainted, and then you can paint it the way you want it. So you'll have a physical mini and a digital version that you can play wherever you want. But I think the players who are going to go wholeheartedly into D&D 1 and the digital landscape, that's the way they're going to do. Why pay $30 or $40? I'm just making these numbers up. Why pay $30 for a digital mini when I'm going to be playing 90% of my games online with an online DM and online friends and players? Why should I pay an extra $20 or $30 for a physical mini that's just going to sit on the shelf? Now, there are D&D players that will buy it because it's cool to have on your shelf, and that's my character. But players traditionally, for me, players have sort of, I won't say expected, it's just understood. The GM is the one who's running the game, and the GM's the one who's spending the money on the adventures and things like that. I don't know how D&D 1's going to do that. I don't know if they're going to, I don't know if they're going to if the players are going to have to subsidize the cost. Like, as a GM, right now as a physical GM, I have to buy the GM's book, and I have to buy the monster miniatures when my players go up against those monsters, and I have to print out the maps and print out anything that's game related. My players, they got to bring their character and their mini and their dice, and that's about it. So the question is, how is Wizards going to find a way? Are they going to look for a way to encourage more GMs by reducing the GM cost, by subsidizing it, by enhancing the player costs? As an example, let's say that one GM, me, and 5 players, a group of 6, decide to play online D&D 1. And we need the software. Is the software going to cost me, the GM, the same amount as it's going to cost the players? I suspect it will. Now, if the GM version of the software has more special features, I can't see Wizards selling that to me at an increased price. Instead, what it'll be is I'll be at a higher tier subscription rate, right? They may have a GM tier and a player tier. But then you have to ask yourself, is that fair? And is Wizards going to look at that and say, well, the GMs aren't going to see that as fair. So if we want to encourage the GMs to stay in our platform and keep playing, we're going to have to find a way to offset some of their costs and shift them to the players. I truly do think this right here is going to be one of the things that makes or breaks the digital D&D 1. I think it's just one of many, but it is going to be one. How are the costs to play going to be spread out, right? Now, those of us who play physical, we just understand the rules. The GM's the one that usually, buys the adventure books and the extra miniatures for the monster, and you bring that to the table and you take it home with you. So what happens when the players are all now meeting in a digital space? Makes me wonder. And I've gotten slightly off topic, but it just popped in my mind that it's going to be interesting. I'm sure somebody, Professor DM, if you're listening out there, run with it. I'm curious to what Dan thinks about that, because when you deal with a digital environment, now everyone's equal, right? I mean, especially if the software costs the same and the miniatures cost the same. Now, as a GM, if I have to buy 50 skeleton digital, a pack of digital skeletons, let's say I want 10, okay, what happens if I want 20? Do I have to pay more money, or are the players, their subscription, is it going to have a certain amount of, I don't know how that's going to work out. It's going to be interesting. If it's just digital model, like for instance, maybe the GM tier just gives me full access to all the menagerie of models and as many of them as I want to throw at the players. But that just doesn't sound right, because if Wizards is going this route to do microtransactions, they're going to want to find a way to charge me, the GM, for every skeleton I drop on the table. Want to put a dragon against your players? I guarantee you that's going to cost more than a party of, say, kobolds or a little group of goblins. It's going to be interesting. I really do think that, we don't know. We don't know how Wizards is going to do this, but it's going to be interesting. All right, that's all I have for tonight. This was a really fast mini, and I'm really, really pleased with how it turned out, because I'm looking at a sheet here for how Rasputin looks, and I nailed it. I got it pretty good. Gray trousers, brown jacket, the flames on the hands, the brown hair. The hair's, I didn't make the hair as dark as it is in his picture, but I could go back over that later with a darker. But I like the reddish brown anyway. Very, very happy with it. I'll take some close-ups of this and put them at the end of this video along with the before pictures unpainted, so you can see how it progressed. All right, that's all I have for this Paint a Mini session. Like I said, I don't script these. I just sort of let my brain take the conversation where it goes. I was a little all over the place, but I hope you understand that, I'm not looking at creating divisions amongst our hobby. I want D&D players to be D&D players. Now, I play Old School Essentials, but I call it D&D, and Wizards will probably sue me for that at some point. You can't say you're playing D&D. You're not playing D&D. Well, I think, and this is another video, I think D&D has become one of those terms like Velcro and Xerox, where we all use it and we know what it means, but it's really a brand name. But is it a brand name that has sort of, become synonymous with fantasy RPG? That's another video. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. All I do know is it's going to be a very interesting next, say, 18 months, as I think Wizards slowly reveals a little at a time. I don't know how they're going to roll it out. I don't know if they're going to roll it out all at once, bits and pieces. Remember, when 5e was released, the first book that came out was I think it was the Player Handbook, then the Dungeon Master Guide, and then the Monster Manual. I think that's the order in which the 5e books came out. But they rolled it out little at a time. They didn't just release all 3 books at once. So it's going to be interesting to see how D&D 1 is released, because you can't play it digitally unless the players have everything they need, the GM or DM has everything they need, all the monsters are released. It's going to be it's a good time to be alive as a gamer, but it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how it flies. And again, I'm concerned only in the sense that I think this is going to affect the future of RPGs. Those of us who want to keep playing socially, locally, We're going to need to make sure that the companies of the RPGs we play know that that is how we prefer to play. Because if we don't, they're going to be watching Wizards, and I think RPG companies are going to say, hey, maybe we should look at doing digital, digital this and digital that. And, we'll see. I don't know. All right, this is Jim, the Tabletop Engineer. Thanks for joining me on this Paint a Mini / discussion video. I'll be back very soon with another Paint a Mini video, and I'll come up with something new to talk about then. But until then, thanks for joining me. If you have any questions or comments, post them below, and I'll do my best to answer them, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.